She took 10 blades for Vampire King's son, then woke to find 8 vampire men in black coats at her bed. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. It was just an ordinary day for Ella, a waitress trying to make ends meet in the crowded streets of New York City. She had been juggling multiple jobs for months now, barely able to keep her head above water. But life, as it often does, had a way of throwing unexpected challenges at her. That night, while working the late shift at a high-end restaurant, she had no idea her life was about to change forever. The restaurant was busy, the air thick with the hum of conversations and the clink of fine china. As Ella moved through the room, balancing trays and serving drinks, she caught a glimpse of a man sitting at a secluded table in the corner. Tall, dark, and unervingly handsome, he had a presence that made everyone around him seem to fade into the background. His eyes were a piercing shade of amber, glowing faintly in the dim lighting. Ella had no idea who he was, but she felt an inexplicable pull towards him. As she made her way toward his table, she accidentally bumped into a nearby waiter, spilling a glass of red wine all over the man's expensive suit. The room seemed to hold its breath. Ella froze, mortified. The man, however, didn't flinch. Instead, he looked at her with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. "It's fine," he said in a voice that sent a shiver down her spine. "You seem nervous." Ella tried to apologize, but before she could say another word, the man stood up and reached out, touching her arm gently. His skin was cold, unnaturally so, and for a moment, Ella felt as if the world around them had disappeared. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice soft but commanding. Before she could answer, the doors of the restaurant burst open, and a group of armed men stormed in, heading straight for the man. Panic spread through the room like wildfire. Ella barely had time to react when the men attacked. A fight broke out, and in the chaos, Ella found herself in the middle of it all, desperately trying to get out of the way. But just as one of the attackers lunged at her, she felt a sharp pain in her side. She had been stabbed 10 times in quick succession. The pain was unbearable. The world around her blurred as she crumpled to the floor, her vision fading. She could hear the vampire man shouting, but everything felt so distant. When Ella awoke, she was no longer in the restaurant. Instead, she found herself lying in a large, dimly lit room, surrounded by men dressed in black coats. 8 of them, all with the same piercing amber eyes, were standing at the foot of her bed. They didn't speak. They just watched her, their expressions unreadable. Ella's heart raced as she tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness washed over her. One of the men stepped forward, his gaze softening as he looked at her. "You're awake," he said. His voice was deep, like the rumble of thunder, and it sent a chill down her spine. "You've been through a lot." Ella didn't understand. Who were these people? Why was she here? What did they want with her? As the man continued to speak, Ella tried to make sense of it all, but nothing made sense. She had no memory of how she got here or why she was still alive after what had happened. The last thing she remembered was the vampire man, the one who had been sitting at the table. Had he saved her? Or was she being kept here for another reason? As the man in black continued to speak, Ella's thoughts swirled, and she knew one thing for sure. Her life would never be the same again. When Ella finally gathered the strength to sit up, the world around her still seemed to spin, her head heavy with the weight of the 10 blades that had been driven into her body just hours before. The room she found herself in was unlike anything she had ever seen. The air was thick with an ancient sense of power, the walls lined with bookshelves, and heavy curtains that blocked out any light, making it feel as though time itself had stopped. Her breathing was shallow as she tried to make sense of her surroundings. The 8 men who had been standing around her bed when she awoke were still there, watching her closely, their eyes never leaving her for a second. The man who had spoken before, the one whose voice seemed to vibrate with authority, now stepped forward. His presence was undeniable, and even though he did not move quickly, there was an aura about him that made Ella feel as though he could reach her in an instant if he wanted to. "How do you feel?" he asked, his voice deep, rich, and calm. Ella opened her mouth to speak, but found that her voice was weak, barely a whisper. I don't understand. Where am I? Who are you? Her words came out in fragments, her throat dry as dust. The man looked at her with a kind of detached curiosity, as if he had seen this kind of confusion many times before. You're in my estate, and we are the ones who owe you for saving the prince. Ella blinked at him, her mind still foggy, trying to piece together the fragments of memory. The Vampire King's son, the image of the young boy flashed before her eyes. She had taken those 10 blades for him, but she hadn't expected to be dragged into a world so far removed from the one she had known. She had been trying to escape the chaos of her own life, not fall deeper into another. The prince, she repeated, still struggling to comprehend. The man's expression softened, and he nodded. Yes, my son. You saved him. Ella's heart skipped a beat as realization began to sink in. The boy she had risked her life for, the one she had barely known, was someone important. But the thought of why he had been attacked, and who these men were, only left her more unsettled. The man noticed her hesitation and took a step closer, his eyes softening in a way that made her feel both uneasy and oddly comforted. There's a lot you don't understand yet, he said gently, but you will. Ella shook her head, her thoughts whirling. I don't even remember how I got here. You were brought here for safety. Another man spoke up, his voice sharp, almost cold. He had been standing near the window, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the night outside. Your injuries were severe. It's a miracle you survived. Ella instinctively pressed her hand to her side where the wounds had been, still feeling the remnants of the pain, though much dulled now. But she was alive, and that in itself felt like a miracle. Yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on here than she could understand. But why am I here? Why have you brought me to this place? The question escaped her lips before she could stop it. The man who had spoken before, the one who had been so calm, looked at her intently, his amber eyes glimmering with something she couldn't quite place. You're here because you are important now, he said, his voice firm but not unkind. You've been chosen to help protect him. Protect who? Ella asked, feeling the confusion return. The man's gaze softened even further. The prince, my son, the one you saved. Ella looked around at the men who were standing there, all of them dressed in dark, formal clothing, their posture straight, their eyes unyielding. They seemed to exude power, an almost palpable force that made her feel small and insignificant in comparison. Yet, there was a strange magnetism about them. She couldn't understand it, but it was there. I didn't do anything special, she said softly, her voice tinged with frustration. I just did what anyone would have done. The man who had spoken first, the one with the intense amber eyes, took another step closer, his expression unreadable. You have no idea, do you? He asked quietly, almost as if speaking to himself. Ella frowned, confused. What do you mean? The man's eyes flicked to the others in the room, and they nodded, as if some unspoken agreement had been reached. Then, he turned back to her. You're not just anyone. You have a connection to our world. A connection that you don't remember, but we do. Ella's heart raced. Her connection to their world? She couldn't even begin to imagine what that could mean. She was just a waitress, a woman struggling to survive, nothing more. But as the man's gaze held hers, a part of her, the part she had buried deep, began to wonder if perhaps she had always been more than she seemed. We'll explain everything in time, he said, his voice softening. But first, you must rest. You've been through a great deal. Ella wanted to protest, to demand answers, but the weariness in her body made it impossible to resist. She hadn't realized just how exhausted she was until that moment. The blood loss, the wounds, the shock, all of it had taken its toll. She nodded, too tired to argue. The man seemed to sense her defeat. We'll be here when you wake up, he promised, his tone reassuring. Ella felt the weight of his words, but there was no escaping the truth. She was in a world she didn't understand, surrounded by people she could not yet trust. But the prince's life was in her hands, and whether she liked it or not, she had to figure out how to navigate the path that lay ahead. The days that followed were a blur for Ella. She rested in a room that felt too large, too quiet, yet it was the first real sleep she had gotten in a long time. She could still feel the stabs of pain from the blades, but with each passing hour, the soreness ebbed away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of confusion and fear. When she woke the next morning, the room was just as dark, the heavy curtains still drawn, the only light coming from a small lamp on a nearby table. The men in black coats were gone, but she knew they were still watching her, somewhere. The mysterious vampire men, the ones who had surrounded her bed, hadn't explained much. They had spoken in riddles, but none of it made any sense to Ella. "I just want to go home," she muttered under her breath as she sat up. She was still dressed in the hospital-like gown they had given her, but she couldn't recall anyone telling her what happened to her clothes. She had been completely taken from the world she knew, placed in a place that felt both foreign and intimidating. Just as she stood, there was a soft knock at the door. She didn't wait for an answer. A woman stepped inside, carrying a tray of food. The woman was dressed in a simple, yet elegant, black gown, and she held herself with an air of calm authority. "You're awake," the woman said, her voice smooth and measured. Ella nodded, but didn't speak. She was tired, confused, and overwhelmed by everything that had happened. The woman smiled gently, noticing Ella's distress. "My name is Lady Seraphine. I'm here to help explain things. There's no need to be afraid." Ella wasn't sure what to make of her words. She felt like she was in a dream, surrounded by strangers, with no idea of who could be trusted. But she couldn't deny that Lady Seraphine had a kind, almost motherly presence. "I'm not afraid," Ella replied, though she wasn't sure if she believed herself. "Then let me help you understand." Seraphine set the tray down on the table beside Ella's bed and sat across from her, her eyes never leaving Ella's face. "You saved the vampire king's son, and for that, you've been brought here. There is much you don't know yet, but you will." Ella felt a chill run through her at the mention of the vampire king. She hadn't forgotten the man who had spoken to her, whose eyes glowed like amber. The one who seemed so powerful and yet so distant. "What does it all mean?" Ella asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It means that you have been chosen, whether you realize it or not. You are tied to this world in a way that most humans aren't," Seraphine said, her tone serious. "The prince, my son, is very important. His life depends on people like you." Ella felt her heart race at the mention of the prince. She had barely known him, had only seen him once, lying unconscious in the bed. But for some reason, saving him had become the most important thing she had ever done. She swallowed hard, trying to piece together everything she was hearing. "Why me?" she asked, almost desperately. "You're not just any human," Seraphine replied, her gaze piercing. "You have a connection to the ancient bloodlines. A connection that runs deeper than you realize." Ella shook her head. "I don't understand. I'm just a waitress. I don't have any special connection to anyone." Seraphine's smile softened. "You may not remember it, but your bloodline is old. It ties you to this world. You were born with the ability to protect the prince, to heal him when no one else could." "Healing him?" Ella repeated, confused. "You mean my blood?" "Yes, your blood," Seraphine confirmed. "It has the power to save him." Ella's mind was racing, trying to comprehend the words that were coming out of Seraphine's mouth. She couldn't remember anything special about herself. She wasn't a healer, and she certainly wasn't someone important in any grand scheme. She had just done what anyone would do, help someone in need. But now she was being told that she had the power to save a prince, to change the fate of an entire world. "This is crazy," Ella muttered, shaking her head in disbelief. "How could I possibly help him?" Seraphine leaned forward slightly, her expression turning serious. "Because you're the only one who can. And now, you must decide. Will you help us protect the prince? Or will you turn your back and walk away, leaving him to his fate?" Ella stared at Seraphine, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't have the answers. She didn't know if she was ready for this kind of responsibility. But one thing was certain. She could not let someone die when she had the power to save them. She thought about the prince, the child she had protected, the one she had sacrificed so much for. His life was in her hands, and she couldn't walk away from that. "I'll help," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. Seraphine nodded, a look of approval in her eyes. "Good. You have no idea how important your choice is." Just as Seraphine stood to leave, Ella spoke again. "What happens next? What do I have to do?" Seraphine turned to face her, her gaze steady. "Next, you will meet the vampire king. He will explain everything to you. And when you are ready, you will begin your role as the prince's protector." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Ella wasn't sure what she had just agreed to, but one thing was clear. Her life had changed forever. The next few hours felt like a blur. Ella was left to contemplate the gravity of her decision, the weight of it pressing down on her chest like an anchor. She could hear the sounds of the mansion around her, the distant chatter of servants, the creak of old floors, but everything felt muted. Her mind kept replaying the words Seraphine had said. You were born with the ability to protect the prince, to heal him when no one else could. Ella could hardly believe it. She wasn't special. She was just an ordinary woman from a broken world, trying to make ends meet. She wasn't some heroine from a fantasy tale. Yet, here she was, entangled in something that seemed like it belonged in a dream she could not wake up from. Before long, the door to her room opened, and a tall figure stepped inside, his presence filling the space. It was the man she had seen before, the one with the amber eyes, the one who had been standing by her side when everything had gone wrong. He walked in slowly, with an almost predatory grace, his eyes fixed on her. You're awake, he said, his voice deep and steady, as if he had been waiting for this moment. Ella nodded, still unsure of what was happening. Yes, she whispered. She didn't know what else to say. She felt small in his presence, like a mouse caught in the gaze of a predator. He stared at her for a long moment, his amber eyes glinting like molten gold. There was a heaviness in the air between them, a silent understanding that neither of them could escape. I'm Lucien, he said after a long pause, his voice softer now. I'm the Vampire King. I'm the one you saved. The words hit Ella like a punch to the gut. Vampire King? This man was the ruler of vampires? She had been protecting the son of a vampire king, a world she had never even believed existed. The enormity of it all overwhelmed her. She swallowed hard, trying to make sense of it. What do you want from me? She finally asked, her voice trembling slightly. Lucien's gaze softened just a fraction. I want you to understand why you're here, he said quietly. Why your life has been entwined with mine. Ella's heart raced in her chest. She wasn't sure she was ready to hear whatever it was he had to say. She wasn't sure she even wanted to know. You have a role to play now, Ella, Lucien continued, his voice calm, but commanding. You've been chosen to protect my son, to heal him. Your blood is what saved him, and your blood is what will keep him alive. Ella felt a rush of panic in her chest. I don't know how to heal him, she protested. I'm not a healer. I'm just. You are more than you think you are, Lucien interrupted, his tone firm. Your bloodline is ancient. Your connection to the magic that runs through this world is stronger than you realize. Ella shook her head, still unsure. I don't understand. How could I have this power? I'm just a waitress. I'm nobody. Lucien stepped closer, his presence filling the room. You're not nobody, Ella. You are the key to my son's survival. And you are the key to a much bigger future than you could have ever imagined. Ella stared at him, trying to process his words. She had always felt small, insignificant. But now, in the presence of this man, she felt the weight of the responsibility she had just accepted. She didn't know how to protect the prince, and she certainly didn't know how to wield the power that was supposed to be inside her. I'm not ready for this, she whispered, almost to herself. Lucien's eyes softened, and for a moment, he almost looked human. None of us are ever ready for our true purpose, Ella, he said quietly. But you're the one who has been chosen, and you will rise to the occasion. I promise you that. Ella felt her heart racing. She had no idea what she had gotten herself into. The world she knew was slipping further and further away, and all she could do was try to hold on. Lucien reached out, his hand hovering near hers. You won't be alone in this, he said, his voice steady. We'll help you, but it's you who must decide what you're willing to sacrifice. Ella looked up at him, her mind swirling with fear, doubt, and uncertainty. She didn't know how to protect the prince, or even how to use the power that was apparently coursing through her. But one thing was certain. She couldn't turn her back on this now. She had already made her choice. She had already saved his life. And now, she had to do everything in her power to make sure he stayed alive. Lucien watched her for a moment, then nodded, as if he understood the weight of the decision she had just made. I'll be waiting, he said quietly before turning and leaving the room, leaving Ella alone with her thoughts. As the door closed behind him, Ella sat in silence, her mind racing. What had she gotten herself into? What was she going to do next? The answers were still elusive, but one thing was clear. Her life would never be the same again. In the days that followed, Ella tried to adjust to the strange new life she had found herself thrust into. The mansion, though grand and beautiful, felt like a cage. The walls seemed to close in on her as she wandered through its vast corridors, searching for something familiar, something to anchor her in this world she didn't understand. But nothing felt familiar. Nothing made sense. Lucien's words echoed in her mind constantly. "You are the key to my son's survival." But how could she be the key? She was just a woman from the streets, a waitress with no special abilities. Yet, everything pointed to the fact that she had powers she didn't know how to control. Every night, she sat alone in her room, staring at her hands, wondering what it all meant. But as much as she tried to ignore it, a part of her felt an undeniable pull toward the prince, the boy she had saved, the child of the Vampire King. It had been days since she last saw him, but his image stayed fresh in her mind. His pale face, his fragile body. How could she protect someone so helpless? One morning, as she was lost in thought, Seraphine appeared in her doorway, her presence calm, yet commanding. "It's time," she said simply, her eyes piercing through Ella. Ella stood up, suddenly nervous. "Time for what?" she asked, her voice trembling. Seraphine smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "Time for you to meet the prince." Ella's heart skipped a beat. She had been avoiding him, unsure of how to face the boy she had saved. But now, it seemed she had no choice. I'm not ready," Ella said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Seraphine raised an eyebrow. "You will never be ready. But that does not change what needs to be done." With that, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floors. Ella stood there for a moment, frozen in place, before she followed. The corridors of the mansion felt longer than usual as she walked behind Seraphine. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and her mind raced with thoughts of the prince. What if she couldn't protect him? What if she failed? But as they approached the prince's chambers, Seraphine turned to her. "The prince is the future of our kind," she said softly, her tone almost gentle. "He is fragile, but there is strength in him. And there is strength in you, too. You must find it." Ella nodded, though she wasn't sure she believed her. She couldn't feel any strength in herself, not after everything she had gone through. But Seraphine's words seemed to stick with her as she stepped into the prince's room. The prince lay in bed, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. He looked so fragile, so broken, that it made Ella's heart ache. The room was dark, the only light coming from the flickering candles on the nightstand. As she stepped closer to the bed, the air around her seemed to grow colder, and she shivered. The prince's skin was still as pale as it had been the last time she saw him. But there was something different now. There was a faint warmth to his body, something Ella had not noticed before. She reached out hesitantly, her fingers brushing his cold hand. His eyes fluttered open, just for a moment, and when they locked with hers, Ella felt something shift inside her. The prince's eyes were amber, like Lucien's, but there was a softness to them, a vulnerability that Ella hadn't expected. He blinked, his lips parting as if he was going to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he raised his hand weakly, as if reaching for her. Ella took his hand gently, her heart racing. She didn't know what to do. What could she do? She wasn't a healer. But the moment their skin touched, something inside her seemed to awaken. A surge of warmth flooded through her, starting from her fingertips and spreading through her body. It was as though she could feel every part of him, his pain, his exhaustion, his desperation. But there was something else, too. Something deep inside her, a force she couldn't explain, that seemed to push back against the darkness surrounding him. The prince's grip tightened slightly, and his breathing deepened. For a brief moment, Ella thought she might lose control. But then, just as quickly as it came, the warmth faded. The prince's hand fell limp in hers, and his eyes closed again. The faintest trace of a smile on his lips. Ella felt her breath catch in her throat. She didn't know what had just happened, but she knew one thing for sure. She was the one who had brought him back, if only for a moment. The prince had felt her touch, had responded to her. And that meant something. "You did it," Seraphine said quietly from behind her, her voice almost a whisper. Ella turned to look at her, her heart still pounding in her chest. What just happened?" she asked, her voice trembling. Seraphine's expression softened slightly. "You awakened his magic. His soul. Your blood connects you to him in ways you don't understand, but it's real. And you've just begun to tap into it." Ella shook her head, still confused. But I don't know how to control it. I don't know how to heal him. Seraphine stepped closer, her eyes meeting Ella's with a new intensity. You don't have to control it. You just have to trust it. Trust yourself. Ella swallowed hard, trying to process the gravity of what Seraphine was saying. Could she really do this? Could she really protect the prince, heal him, even if she didn't fully understand how? As the prince lay motionless in his bed, his life still fragile, Ella made a silent promise to herself. She would learn. She would find a way to protect him, no matter the cost. The days passed slowly, each one blending into the next, but for Ella, nothing felt normal anymore. The mansion, once a foreign place to her, had started to feel like her prison. Every hallway she walked down seemed colder than the last, the weight of her responsibilities pressing down on her shoulders. She could still feel the pull of the prince's magic, a connection that terrified her as much as it comforted her. But as the days wore on, Ella's doubts grew. The prince, though alive, had shown no further signs of improvement. He remained in a deep, unnatural sleep, his body cold to the touch. And no matter what she tried, nothing seemed to change. The power inside her, the one Seraphine had spoken of, felt so foreign, so impossible to control. She couldn't even begin to understand how to use it. One evening, after another failed attempt to help the prince, Ella found herself standing in front of the large, dark window in her room, staring out into the night. The full moon cast long shadows across the courtyard, and the air outside was thick with the scent of earth and damp leaves. It felt like everything was closing in on her, and she couldn't escape the feeling that she was failing. Failing the prince, failing herself, and failing the world she had been thrown into. Just as she was about to turn away, there was a soft knock at her door. She turned quickly, her heart racing, but when the door opened, it wasn't Seraphine or one of the other men in black. It was Lucien. His tall figure filled the doorway, and for a moment, Ella felt a strange warmth wash over her. She had been avoiding him since that night in the prince's chamber. She didn't know why. Maybe because his presence made her feel something that confused her and frightened her all at once. Ella, he said softly, his voice steady. May I come in? Ella nodded, though her stomach twisted with anxiety. Lucien stepped inside, his eyes never leaving hers. I know this isn't easy for you, he said, his voice low, almost like a whisper. None of this was your choice. Ella swallowed, unsure of how to respond. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, she admitted, her voice cracking. I don't know how to help him. I don't know how to heal him. Lucien stepped closer, his amber eyes filled with a depth of emotion she couldn't quite place. You're doing more than you think, he said quietly. You saved him once. That's more than anyone else could do. Ella looked down at the floor, trying to hide the tears that threatened to fall. But it's not enough, she whispered. I can't feel anything. The connection, it's like a flicker, a spark that I can't control. Lucien reached out then, gently lifting her chin so their eyes met. You're afraid, he said softly, his words laced with understanding. And that's okay. But fear is something we can work through together. You're not alone in this. Ella's breath caught in her throat. She had never been more afraid in her life. But hearing his words, hearing his promise of support, made something inside her stir. For the first time since she had come to this strange world, she didn't feel entirely lost. What if? I can't do it, she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Lucien's expression softened, and for a moment, he looked almost vulnerable. Then we'll find another way, he said, his hand still resting gently under her chin. But I believe in you, Ella. You have power, even if you don't understand it yet. And I won't let you fail. His words wrapped around her like a shield, giving her a sense of comfort she had not felt before. She had been lost in the storm of this world, unsure of where to turn or how to proceed. But Lucien's presence, his unwavering confidence in her, gave her the strength to keep going. I don't know if I'm ready to face all of this, Ella said, her voice trembling slightly. But I can't walk away now. Lucien smiled, a small, almost imperceptible smile, but it was enough to fill her with a sense of determination. I wouldn't expect you to, and you won't have to face it alone. As Lucien turned to leave, he paused at the door. Rest tonight, Ella. Tomorrow, we'll start again. I'll be here when you're ready. Ella watched him go, her heart still racing. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know how she was going to save the prince, or how she was going to control the power within her. But for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. And that, for now, was enough to keep her going. The next day, Ella woke with a renewed sense of purpose. The morning light filtered through the heavy curtains of her room, casting long shadows across the floor. It was a strange kind of peace, the calm before the storm, and Ella knew it was time to stop hiding from what she had to do. She had spent days wrestling with her fears, doubting her abilities, and questioning the path that had been laid out before her. But Lucien's words still lingered in her mind. You won't have to face it alone. With a deep breath, she stood and gathered the courage to move forward. As she made her way through the mansion, she found herself drawn to the prince's room again. She hadn't seen him since that night, since she had touched his hand and felt the flicker of power surge through her. But that moment had been brief, and since then, he had remained in his deep slumber, as if the life she had sparked inside him had faded just as quickly as it had come. The prince's room was as quiet as ever, the soft light from the candles casting a warm glow across the space. Ella hesitated at the door, unsure of what to expect. She had never been trained for this, never imagined she would find herself in a situation like this. But it was too late to turn back now. With a soft knock, she pushed the door open. The prince lay still, as he always did, his pale skin contrasting against the dark velvet of the sheets. His breathing was shallow, barely audible, but there was something different about him today. His chest rose and fell in a steadier rhythm, as if the warmth she had given him had sparked a change. Ella stepped closer, her heart racing in her chest. She had no idea what she was doing, but she knew she couldn't give up on him. She reached out, her fingers trembling slightly as she brushed his cold hand once again. This time, it was different. This time, she could feel the faintest thrum of energy running through him, a pulse that was more than just his heartbeat. She could feel the magic, the life force that flowed through his veins, trying to fight back the curse that held him captive. As her hand rested over his, she closed her eyes and focused, drawing on whatever strength she could find. She wasn't sure how it worked, but the connection was undeniable. The power inside her, the one she had felt when she first touched him, was there again. It was stronger now, more present, like a fire that refused to be extinguished. The prince's hand twitched beneath hers, and for the first time in days, his eyelids fluttered. Ella's breath caught in her throat. His eyes opened slowly, the amber depths glowing faintly in the low light. He looked at her, and for a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of recognition in his gaze. But then the moment passed, and his eyes closed again, the faintest of smiles touching his lips. Ella's heart surged. It wasn't much, but it was enough. He had felt her. He had responded to her. It was more than she had ever expected, more than she had dared hope for. She pulled back, her fingers still lingering on his hand as she took a shaky breath. She hadn't healed him, not fully, but she had awoken something inside him. She had reached him. Ella couldn't explain it, but she knew one thing for sure. She was on the right path. Just as she was about to step back, the door to the room opened, and Lucien stepped inside. His gaze immediately fell on the prince, and then to Ella. He watched her for a long moment, his amber eyes studying her intently. "You did it," he said quietly, his voice filled with awe. Ella swallowed, still in shock from what had just happened. "I don't know how. I felt something," she said, her voice shaky. Lucien nodded, his expression softening. "You're more powerful than you realize." Ella shook her head. "But I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to control it." Lucien stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "That's okay," he said, his tone gentle yet firm. "You don't have to control it. You just have to trust it. Trust yourself." Ella looked down at the prince, her heart still racing in her chest. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucien's gaze softened, and for the first time, he looked almost human. "Now we wait. But you've made progress. The prince is waking up, and that's more than we could have hoped for." Ella nodded, a mix of relief and fear washing over her. She had done something real. But she knew the journey wasn't over yet. There was still so much to learn, so much to understand. She wasn't ready for all of it, but one thing was certain. She was going to fight for the prince. She was going to help him, no matter the cost. As Lucien stepped back, he paused at the door. "Rest now," he said. "You've done more than enough for today." Ella watched him leave, her heart still racing. As the door clicked shut behind him, she turned back to the prince, her eyes lingering on his peaceful face. He wasn't fully awake yet, but she had seen the spark of life in him, and that was enough to keep her going. She would find a way to bring him back. She would fight for him, just as she had fought for herself. And maybe, just maybe, she would find the answers she was looking for. Days passed, and with each one, Ella could feel the weight of her new role growing heavier on her shoulders. The prince, though still unconscious most of the time, showed slight signs of improvement. His breathing was deeper, his skin warmer, and sometimes, Ella swore she could see his fingers twitch as if he was reaching for something. Maybe her. Despite the progress, she knew that the hardest part was yet to come. How could she heal him fully when she barely understood what had happened between them? Each time she touched him, it felt like something was awakening inside her, but she was terrified that she might never fully control it. The mansion had become her new reality, a place where silence hung in the air like a heavy fog, broken only by the occasional whispers of the servants or the creaking of the ancient wood beneath her feet. It wasn't much of a home, but it was the only place she could go. Every now and then, Lucien would visit her, his presence always commanding but never unkind. He would offer encouragement, but it always felt like there was something more he wasn't saying. Something important. One morning, as Ella was seated by the prince's bedside once more, she felt a presence before she saw it. The air seemed to thicken, and then Lucien entered the room, his amber eyes fixed on her. "How is he today?" he asked, his voice soft but filled with an authority that still made Ella feel small. Ella shook her head, her heart heavy. "I don't know. I feel like I'm getting nowhere. I don't understand it, Lucien. Every time I try to help him, it's like the connection fades just as quickly as it comes." Lucien studied her for a long moment, his gaze never wavering. "It's because you're still fighting it," he said finally, his voice low but firm. "You're afraid of the power inside you, and that fear is holding you back. You need to trust it. Trust yourself." Ella looked down at her hands, still trembling slightly from the recent touch with the prince. "I don't know how. I don't even know where to begin." Lucien stepped closer, his expression softening just a little. "I know it's difficult, but you have the ability to reach him. You've done it before." Ella looked up at him, meeting his gaze. "But it wasn't enough. He's still not awake. I haven't done enough." Lucien's eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment, he looked almost vulnerable. "It's not about being enough," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "It's about being willing to try, even when it seems impossible." Ella swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words settle deep inside her chest. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucien took another step closer, his presence overwhelming. "I know you think you don't have control, that you're not ready for this. But I need you to understand, Ella. You were never meant to do this alone." Ella frowned, still struggling to grasp his meaning. "What do you mean? You've told me I'm the key, that my blood is important. But I don't understand how. I don't know what I'm supposed to do." Lucien reached out, his fingers brushing against her hand. The simple touch sent a ripple of warmth through her, a reminder of the connection that still flowed between them. "Your blood is important," he said softly. "But it's more than that. It's your will, your heart. That's what can heal him." Ella's heart raced as his words settled in. She had been so focused on the idea of power, of control, that she had forgotten something crucial. The power inside her wasn't about control, it was about trust. Trust in herself. Trust in the connection she had with the prince. She looked at Lucien, her eyes clearer than they had been in days. "I understand now," she said quietly. Lucien smiled, his gaze filled with something unreadable, something she couldn't quite place. "Good," he said, his voice almost gentle. "Then it's time to try again." That evening, Ella stood by the prince's side once more, her hands trembling but steady with purpose. She could feel the connection between them, a faint pulse that had always been there, but had been clouded by her own doubts. The prince's body was still cold, his breathing shallow, but this time, Ella knew what she had to do. She reached out, placing her hand over his, and closed her eyes. She focused not on the power, not on the magic, but on the bond she shared with him, the warmth that flowed between them, the trust she had finally found in herself. As she let go of her fear, the warmth inside her grew, expanding until it enveloped the prince. His body twitched, his chest rising and falling with a deeper breath. Ella's heart raced as she felt the magic surge through her, stronger than before. It was as if the connection was finally complete. She could feel the prince's pulse beneath her hand, steady and strong. His eyelids fluttered, and for the first time in days, Ella saw his eyes open fully. Amber, deep and bright, met hers, and in that moment, everything else fell away. Ella could hardly breathe, her heart pounding in her chest as the prince's gaze locked with hers. She had done it. He was awake. The magic had worked. The prince was alive, truly alive, for the first time in what felt like forever. And Ella, for the first time, felt like she had truly found her place in this world, beside him, where she was meant to be. The days after the prince woke up felt like a new beginning for Ella. His eyes, bright and full of life, were now constantly seeking her out, as if he knew she was the reason he had returned from the brink of death. Every time she touched him, she could feel the magic between them, a bond stronger than anything she had ever experienced. It was as if she was tethered to him in ways she couldn't yet fully comprehend. The prince, whose name was revealed to be Kaelen, remained in the mansion, still weak but slowly regaining his strength. The healing process was slow, but with each passing day, he grew stronger. Yet, despite the progress, Ella couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The mansion, with its towering walls and dark corridors, felt less like a place of refuge and more like a cage. Lucien had been watching her closely, his presence always looming in the background. He had made it clear that she was vital to Kaelen's recovery, but he never fully explained why. Ella wanted answers, but she wasn't sure if she was ready to hear the truth. That morning, as she sat by Kaelen's bedside, she could feel the weight of his gaze on her. He had been staring at her for some time, a soft smile playing on his lips. "You've done so much for me," Kaelen said, his voice still weak but steady. Ella shook her head, not wanting to hear it. "You're the one who's waking up. It's you who's healing." Kaelen's eyes softened. "But you're the one who gave me the strength to do so. I can feel it, Ella. I feel your power every time you're near." His words, though kind, unsettled her. She had never thought of herself as powerful, but in the presence of Kaelen, it felt like something within her had shifted. She didn't know how to explain it, but she couldn't deny that he was right. There was a connection between them, one that went beyond anything she had ever known. As the days passed, Ella spent more and more time with Kaelen, helping him regain his strength. They talked, shared stories, and even laughed at times, but there was always an unspoken tension between them. Ella couldn't help but feel drawn to him, but she kept her distance, unsure of what it all meant. Lucien, however, seemed to be aware of their growing connection. He often appeared at the door, his sharp gaze piercing through them both. He never said much, but Ella could feel the weight of his watchful eyes. One evening, as she was preparing to leave Kaelen's room, Lucien stopped her in the hallway. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, something that made Ella feel uneasy. "You've done well," Lucien said, his voice calm. "But you must understand that Kaelen's recovery is not just about healing his body." Ella frowned, confused. "What do you mean? He's getting better, isn't he?" Lucien's gaze darkened slightly. "Yes, but there's more to it than that. His mind, his soul, they are still bound by the curse that brought him to the brink of death." Ella's heart skipped a beat. "The curse?" she repeated. "What curse?" Lucien's eyes narrowed. "Kaelen is no ordinary prince. His bloodline is ancient, and his curse is tied to the very fate of our world. The magic you've awakened in him has the potential to break the curse, but it also has the potential to destroy him." Ella's stomach turned. She hadn't realized the full weight of what she had done. "So I'm not just healing him?" she asked, her voice shaking. "No," Lucien replied, his tone serious. "You're tied to him, now in a way that no one else is. And that bond will either save him or destroy him." Ella's mind raced. She had only wanted to help. She hadn't known that there were consequences to her actions, that the magic she had awakened in herself and Kaelen could bring danger. "What am I supposed to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucien's expression softened slightly, though his gaze remained intense. "Trust yourself, Ella. Trust the bond between you and Kaelen. You are the only one who can break the curse. But you must choose carefully." His words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Ella didn't know how to respond. She had no idea what Lucien meant, but she could feel the weight of his words. She was connected to Kaelen in ways she couldn't explain, and that connection felt like a lifeline, but also like a trap. She had already given so much of herself to him. Could she really risk everything to save him? As Lucien walked away, Ella stood frozen in the hallway, the enormity of what she had just learned settling in her chest like a stone. She had no answers, only more questions. But there was one thing she knew for sure. She couldn't walk away from Kaelen. She had already committed herself to him, and now, more than ever, she needed to find a way to break the curse that bound him. She had no idea how, but she would find a way. The thought of losing him, of failing him, was unbearable. And so, with that resolve hardening in her chest, Ella stepped forward, determined to do whatever it took to save Kaelen, even if it meant facing the dangers that lay ahead. Days blended into nights as Ella continued to care for Kaelen, her resolve hardening with every passing moment. The mansion, once a place of uncertainty and fear, had become her home, albeit one filled with questions and unanswered doubts. Each day she spent with Kaelen, she felt the connection between them grow stronger, and with it, the responsibility. The curse that bound him was no longer just a distant concept. It was real, and it threatened everything. She could feel it deep within her bones, this invisible force that hovered between them, pulling at her in ways she didn't understand. Lucien's words echoed in her mind. You are the only one who can break the curse, but you must choose carefully. He had given her no answers, only more questions. But Ella had made her choice. She had already committed to Kaelen, and now, she was determined to find a way to save him, even if she had to face whatever dangers lay ahead. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Ella found herself standing in the garden of the mansion, her gaze lost in the beauty of the world around her. The air was crisp, and the scent of the blooming flowers mixed with the earthy smell of the trees. It was peaceful here, yet the calm only seemed to amplify the storm inside her. She couldn't stop thinking about the curse, about how she had awakened something within Kaelen, but had no idea how to control it. How could she protect him when she didn't even know the full extent of what she was dealing with? As she wandered deeper into the garden, she heard the sound of footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw Lucien approaching, his dark figure framed by the setting sun. He looked as composed as ever, but there was something different about him today, something in his eyes that made her pause. Ella, he said, his voice low but steady. We need to talk. Ella nodded, bracing herself for whatever it was he had to say. What is it? She asked, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. Lucien walked closer, his gaze never leaving hers. It's about the curse, he began. You've made progress, but the path ahead will not be easy. There are forces at play that even I cannot fully predict. Ella's stomach tightened at his words. What do you mean? What forces? Lucien's expression darkened. There are others who seek to control Kaelen, to use his power for their own ends. The curse that binds him is not just a curse. It's a weapon, and many will stop at nothing to take it. Ella's heart pounded in her chest. So, we're not just fighting the curse. We're fighting others who want him for themselves. Lucien nodded, his jaw set in determination. Exactly. And that's why you need to be prepared. You need to learn to control your power, to harness the magic within you. Ella shook her head. I don't know how. I don't even know where to start. Lucien took a step closer, his presence overwhelming but strangely comforting. You've already started, Ella. Every time you've been near Kaelen, every time you've touched him, you've tapped into it. You just need to trust yourself. Ella looked down at her hands, the same hands that had healed the prince, the hands that had sparked a bond between them. She didn't feel powerful. She felt scared, unsure, lost in a world that was anything but ordinary. How can I trust myself? She whispered. Lucien's gaze softened slightly. Because you're more than you realize. You're the only one who can help him, and you'll find the strength you need, even if you don't know where it comes from. Ella met his gaze, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and hope. But what if I fail? What if I can't do it? Lucien reached out, his hand resting on her shoulder. Then you won't be alone. I'll be with you, every step of the way, and we'll fight together. His words were like a lifeline, pulling her back from the edge of doubt. Ella felt a surge of determination rise within her. She had come this far. She had awakened the prince, and now it was time to finish what she had started. What do I need to do? She asked, her voice steady now. Lucien gave her a small nod. Tonight, you'll begin your training. I'll help you understand your magic, how to control it, We don't have much time, Ella, but we will make it work. As he spoke, the weight of the responsibility settled back on Ella's shoulders, but it didn't feel as heavy as it had before. She wasn't alone in this. Lucien was here, and together, they would fight to save Kaelen. And as she stood there, in the fading light of the garden, she made a silent vow to herself. She would do whatever it took to break the curse, to save Kaelen, and to finally understand the power that flowed within her. The training began that evening, just as Lucien had promised. The night was thick with the stillness of the mansion, the only sound the occasional rustle of the trees outside, whispering in the wind. Ella stood in the center of a large, empty room, the walls of which were lined with ancient books and tapestries that seemed to hum with untold stories. Lucien had brought her here, away from Kaelen's side, so they could focus solely on what Ella needed to learn. She wasn't sure what to expect, but a part of her had already resigned itself to the fact that this was her reality now, one full of power, magic, and dangers she couldn't yet comprehend. "Close your eyes," Lucien instructed, his voice calm and steady. Ella obeyed, though her heart was pounding in her chest. The uncertainty, the fear, it all seemed to bubble up, but she couldn't afford to let it control her. "Focus on the connection," Lucien continued. "Feel it between you and him, the prince. Let the bond flow through you. Let it guide you." Ella took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She thought back to the moment when she had touched Kaelen's hand, when the warmth had surged through her. That was the bond. That was the magic. But it felt like such a fragile thing, so easy to lose. "I don't know how to feel it," Ella said softly, her voice barely audible in the silence. "I can barely understand it." Lucien's voice softened, though it still held its commanding tone. "You don't need to understand it all at once, Ella. Just trust in the feeling. Trust in the bond. Let it guide you." Ella closed her eyes tighter, blocking out the distractions of the world around her. She focused on her breathing, slow and steady, and then she thought of Kaelen, the way his hand had felt beneath hers, the way his presence seemed to fill the room, even when he was asleep. She thought of the warmth, the pulse of life that had connected them. At first, it was faint, like a distant heartbeat. But slowly, as she allowed herself to relax, it grew stronger. She could feel the pull between them, the way his energy seemed to intertwine with hers. It was like an invisible thread, connecting them in ways she couldn't fully explain. "Good," Lucien said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Now expand that feeling. Let it fill you. Let it grow." Ella obeyed, her focus shifting, expanding outward. She could feel the warmth filling her chest, her arms, her legs. It was like a fire that spread through her body, not painful but powerful. The magic that had once seemed so foreign to her now felt like a part of her, something deep inside that she could tap into if she just let go of the fear. "I can feel it," Ella said, her voice shaky but filled with awe. "I can feel him. I can feel the magic." Lucien's voice was steady, but Ella could hear the pride in it. "You've taken the first step. Now try to move it. Focus on Kaelen, on the energy you share with him. Guide it toward him." Ella nodded, though doubt still lingered. Could she really do this? Could she really control this magic, this power that felt so much bigger than her? But there was no turning back now. She focused on the prince, on the bond between them, and imagined sending that warmth to him, like a thread of light, weaving through the air and reaching for him. At first, nothing happened. But then, just as she began to doubt herself, she felt it, a subtle shift in the air, like a whisper of wind brushing past her skin. It was faint, but it was there. "Good," Lucien said again, his tone filled with approval. "You've made progress. But this is only the beginning. The connection you share with Kaelen is not just physical. It's deep, ancient magic, and it can be harnessed, but only if you trust it fully." Ella opened her eyes, feeling a sense of exhaustion, but also a flicker of pride. She had done something real. She wasn't sure how she had done it, but she had felt it. She had reached Kaelen, even from a distance. "What happens now?" Ella asked, her voice still shaky. Lucien stepped forward, his eyes glowing faintly with a strange light. "Now, we move to the next phase. You've learned to connect with Kaelen, but you need to learn to protect him. The curse he carries is not just a physical burden. It's a mental and spiritual one, and it's up to you to help him carry it. You must learn to shield him from the darkness that seeks to take him." Ella nodded, though her mind was still spinning. "How do I do that?" she asked, her voice full of uncertainty. Lucien's gaze softened, though there was still an edge to it. You must become one with the magic you've awakened. The power inside you is not just a tool, it's a part of you, and until you learn to wield it, you'll never be able to protect Kaelen fully. Ella took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. This wasn't just about saving the prince. This was about her transformation, her journey into something she didn't yet fully understand. She had already started down this path, and now there was no turning back. I'll do whatever it takes, she said, her voice filled with determination. Lucien nodded approvingly. Good. Now we begin. As the night deepened, Ella prepared herself for whatever lay ahead. She knew the journey was far from over, but for the first time, she felt ready to face the challenges that awaited her. The magic inside her was no longer a mystery. It was a part of her, and she would use it to protect Kaelen, no matter the cost. The following days felt like a whirlwind of constant training and new revelations. Ella spent hours in the mansion's vast, dimly lit library with Lucien, studying ancient texts that seemed to hum with power. She could feel the magic inside her, now awakened and more tangible than ever, but every time she tried to harness it, she felt like she was stumbling in the dark. Lucien was patient, always guiding her, but Ella couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. They hadn't discussed the specifics of the curse much, but she could tell it was getting worse. Kaelen's condition seemed stable at times, but the shadows under his eyes never seemed to fade. There were moments when his gaze seemed to lose focus, as if the curse had begun to pull him back into the darkness from which Ella had pulled him. She knew she couldn't wait any longer. Her magic was the only thing that could save him, and yet, she couldn't figure out how to control it fully. Each attempt she made felt like reaching for a flame that always danced just out of her grasp. One evening, after yet another training session, Ella found herself in the hallway, staring at the door to Kaelen's room. She hadn't seen him much during the day. He had been resting, or perhaps, locked in his own battle with the curse. A small part of her wanted to run to him, to touch him and try to heal him again, but doubt gripped her. What if she failed him? What if she couldn't break the curse? She took a deep breath and knocked softly on the door. When there was no answer, she pushed it open, stepping inside. Kaelen was lying on the bed, his eyes closed, but there was something about his stillness that made Ella's heart ache. He looked almost peaceful, yet she could sense the deep battle raging inside him, a battle she couldn't see but could feel. Kaelen, she whispered, stepping closer to him. His eyes fluttered open, meeting hers with a look that almost felt resigned. Ella knelt beside him, her hands trembling slightly. I'm here, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm not going anywhere. He didn't speak, but his gaze softened, and for the first time in days, Ella saw a flicker of something more than exhaustion in his eyes. It was as if he was trying to say something, but the words wouldn't come. The air between them felt heavy with unspoken emotions, and Ella realized, with a sinking heart, how much he was depending on her. She had already come this far, and now, it was time to face whatever darkness lay ahead. I'll find a way, she whispered, her voice full of determination. I swear, I'll find a way to save you. She reached out and gently took his hand, trying to send him the strength she was struggling to hold on to herself. For a moment, nothing happened. The room remained still, the only sound the soft rustle of the sheets. Then, slowly, she felt it. A surge of warmth, faint at first, but growing stronger. She closed her eyes, focusing on the bond between them, willing herself to connect with the magic she had been struggling to control. The warmth spread through her body, filling her chest, her arms, and then into her fingertips, where it finally reached Kaelen. She held her breath, unsure of what was happening, but then she felt it. His pulse. It was faint, but it was there. His fingers moved slightly under hers, and his breath deepened. Ella's heart raced as she watched him, her hand still holding his. The connection between them was stronger now, as if the curse was beginning to loosen its grip, even if just for a moment. She wasn't sure how it had happened, whether it was her own magic or something else entirely, but she had done it. She had reached him. For the first time since she had arrived in the mansion, Ella felt the weight of the magic inside her shift. The bond between her and Kaelen was no longer something she feared. It was something she could control. The warmth in her chest was no longer a spark. It was a fire, one that burned with purpose. Kaelen, She whispered again, her voice thick with emotion. Stay with me. His eyes fluttered open again, and this time, the confusion that had once clouded them was gone. In its place was something new, something that felt like hope. She didn't know how long they stayed like that, her hand in his, their hearts connected by an invisible thread of magic and fate. All she knew was that, for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt like she had made a real difference. The curse wasn't gone, not by a long shot, but she had taken a step toward breaking it. She had taken a step toward saving him. And for the first time in days, Ella believed that she could do it. As the night stretched on, the warmth between them remained, and with it, Ella's resolve. She wouldn't stop. She would fight for Kaelen. She would fight for their future, whatever it took. The weeks that followed felt like a dream and a nightmare all at once. Kaelen's strength had returned in full force, and with it, the curse that had once held him captive seemed to fade into the background. But Ella knew it wasn't gone. She could still feel the shadows lurking, the dangers that threatened to pull him back into the abyss. They were always just at the edge of her consciousness, waiting for the right moment to strike. But with each passing day, the bond between her and Kaelen grew stronger. The warmth they shared was no longer just magic. It was a connection that felt real, something deep within her that she knew she couldn't live without. They had come so far together, but Ella could sense that their trials were far from over. One evening, as she stood by Kaelen's side, watching him pace the room with the same restless energy that had once consumed him, she realized how much they had both changed. He wasn't the same fragile prince she had first encountered. He had become someone else, someone stronger, someone who could stand beside her, not just because she had saved him, but because they were now partners in this fight. You've been quiet, Kaelen said, his voice drawing her out of her thoughts. She turned to look at him, his amber eyes filled with both concern and understanding. Just thinking, she replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. About everything. I know, he said, his voice soft but firm. I can feel it. We're not out of danger yet. Ella nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of the unspoken truth. There were still enemies out there, forces that would stop at nothing to claim Kaelen's power for themselves. The prince's bloodline was ancient, and with it, a curse so old and dangerous that even Lucien had warned her of the consequences if they failed. I've never been more afraid, Ella admitted quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Kaelen stepped toward her, his presence filling the space between them. I know, he said gently, but I'm not afraid anymore, not with you by my side. Ella's breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, the weight of their situation seemed to lift. In his words, she found strength. In his eyes, she saw hope. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to believe that they could survive this, that they could win. But the peace was fleeting. The following morning, a messenger arrived with troubling news. The vampire lords, ruthless and powerful, were gathering, and their intentions were clear. They had learned of Kaelen's awakening, and they were coming to claim him. They can't have him, Lucien said, his tone cold as he met with Ella and Kaelen. Not while I'm still standing. The determination in his voice sent a shiver down Ella's spine. Lucien was a powerful ally, but even he knew the stakes were high. This was no longer just about Kaelen's survival. It was about the fate of their entire world. What are we going to do? Ella asked, her voice thick with fear. Kaelen stepped forward, his eyes fierce and resolute. We fight. We stand together, and we fight. I won't let them take me. Not now, not ever. Lucien nodded in agreement, his face set in grim determination. We'll need to gather our forces. The time for hiding is over. We face them head on. Ella felt the weight of their words, but she knew they were right. There was no more running. She had come too far, and now, it was time to protect what she had fought for. The prince. Their bond. Their future. That evening, Lucien and his men prepared for the coming battle, while Ella stood with Kaelen in the garden, the last rays of the setting sun casting a golden glow over the horizon. The air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers, but there was no escaping the tension that hung between them. We don't know how this will end, Ella said, her voice shaky. I know, Kaelen replied, his voice steady. But I do know one thing. I trust you, Ella. Whatever happens, we face it together. Ella's heart swelled at his words. She had never imagined she would find herself in a battle like this, not for herself, but for someone else. But here she was, standing beside Kaelen, ready to face the unknown. The battle would come. She didn't know when or how it would unfold, but she knew one thing for sure. They would fight with everything they had. And no matter what happened, she would never leave Kaelen's side. She would protect him, just as she had promised. And in that moment, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ella felt the power within her shift. It wasn't just magic. It was love. It was strength. It was a bond that could not be broken, no matter the cost. Together, they would stand against the darkness, and no force in this world could tear them apart.